Hopefully that is the case. Hopefully people can see and hear us where you're at. If you can, thanks for joining us. My name is Mark Benson. I live in Oak Park, and I am what NASA calls a solar system ambassador. And I also volunteer doing telescope stuff at the Adler Planetarium when the Adler Planetarium is open. So tonight we have, if you joined me for these before, you may recognize Michelle Nichols from the Adler. She is the Director of Public Observing. So we had her on before. We talked a lot about what you could see in the night sky, what you could observe, a lot of astronomy things, but a lot of questions came up about telescopes themselves. So we wanted to focus in on the telescopes themselves, and we are going to give that a go.
Telescopes.
Focus in, see?
Good.
I got
like
my optics
you're
are in tune. Yeah, this is good. So we're going to try a few different things tonight. She has some very fancy tools over there to show some, to move the camera around, to kind of get inside some telescopes to really show you the parts. So if you are at home and you have a dusty telescope from your closet and you don't know what to do with it, go ahead and bring it out, have it sitting there. There are all sorts of different types of telescopes, all sorts of different sizes and shapes. The one I have behind me is very different from at least one that I know she has behind her. So we may not have exactly your telescope, but we will have a telescope that has a similar function to yours. So we can help with that. Obviously, you can ask questions. We will get to them if we can. So thank you very much for being here, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun last time, and all of a sudden it's like an hour and a half was gone, and then we had to stop. So we
had to stop. We were just getting into the good stuff. We were just getting into gravitational waves and dark energy. I mean, we were really getting into it.
No, we weren't.
So, all right. So we have, we'll throw up some pictures to try to give everyone a better understanding of what you're going to see when you look through telescope, not just how they work, but what you could expect to see. Because if you are, especially if you're working with kids and you expect to see an image like a spacecraft circling a planet might take, and then you see what you actually are going to see through a telescope from your backyard, you might be less impressed when you really should be very impressed. So we're going to give you some context of what you will be able to see. We'll handle that too. So we have some good planetary pictures taken from different telescopes. So why don't you start us off? What telescope would you like to show us, and what part do you want to start with?
All right. Well, the first thing I have to do, because I would be remiss if I forgot to do this, happy 30th anniversary to the Hubble Space Telescope. Today.
Yay!
Yep. So today, 30 years ago, the Hubble Space Telescope was launched via the Space Shuttle Discovery. And 30 years ago tomorrow, it was taken out of the payload bay using the robotic arm and essentially plopped out the side. And yep. And so 30 years ago tomorrow, we had an actual space telescope. So
actual space telescope with astigmatism.
Right, with astigmatism.
Like me. So I very much associated with Hubble. I thought, I can't see anything either. And then you put the right lens on. Yep. Totally good after that.
Yep. You put the right eyeglasses on a space telescope and it works. So,
which is basically, if you don't know the Hubble, that's basically what they did. They sent astronauts up to pull an optometry visit, and they fixed it. And do you have a favorite Hubble image?
Oh gosh, I have several. So the Pillars of Creation image, the one that really got everyone's attention back in 1995. And that's the one with those glowing dark clouds of dust, and it just got splashed on the front cover of every newspaper around the world. And it was that really cemented Hubble as number one, it was fixed, and number two, it showed what that thing could actually do, and people were so intrigued. And so that one I will always love. It has taken periodic images of other things, including the Whirlpool Galaxy, which is this very classic spiral shape bunch of stars. And that was just so pretty. And I like them all. I mean, let's be real. But they just released a 30th anniversary image today of something that I don't know if it has been imaged before by Hubble, but it's a stunning picture. So if you want to go check that out, it's really,
Google
really
that
great.
one this evening.
Yeah. What's that?
Google that one.
Google that one. Yep. So, but what's amazing about telescopes is they're essentially working off of optics designs from about 350 to 400 years ago, essentially. The physics is still the same. And why mess with a good thing if you know it works? Just fancy it up a little bit and you're good. So the telescope that I have here, which in a second I'll move the camera so everyone can see it. Telescope that I have here is one that we take out to neighborhoods and stuff when we do our Scopes in the City telescope outreach program. We take this one out and it gets people's attention because it looks big, it looks impressive, but it's surprisingly inexpensive. And it's surprisingly straightforward in how it works. And so I want to show that to folks. So let me, let's see, I'm going to turn the camera. I'm going to get it in the right spot here. So I'm putting the camera on top of my computer. Actually, I may just have to hang on to it here. Yep, there we go. Okay. All right. So we have a telescope that it is a telescope with a very long tube. So forgive me, this is going to be weird until I get used to it. And it looks fairly tall. It's almost as tall as me, and it's very impressive. And if I take the cover off of it, turn it around, and I'm going to point.
Can look inside.
Down the two. There we go. So there's a mirror at the end there. Yeah, it's very empty. Lots of open space. Oh, sorry. I'm getting used to which way I can move my arm here.
Yep.
So what happens is the light comes in through the front of the tube. All right. Now it's very common that people walk up to this telescope and they want to look through the back of the telescope, because you think of telescopes and you go, oh well, that's how they all work. Well, it's a common thing where people want to do that. So it might be surprising to some folks that you actually look through the side of the telescope. So the light comes in, goes down the tube, and that mirror down at the other end is shaped like a bowl, and the light bounces back up from that mirror. And I'm going to put my hand here. So right here is a little round thing, and forgive me, this is kind of weird. So I'm kind of getting used to what
highly technical maneuver here.
There we go. So on the other side of this round thing here, there's a flat mirror. And actually you can see my reflection.
You can see it in the back, actually.
In the back. There we go.
Yep.
So there's a flat mirror right here. So the light goes in through the tube, bounces off that mirror, comes back up, bounces off this flat mirror, and it goes out the side of the telescope. So put the camera back. There we go. There you go. And so this is where you put your eye, right here. So I need to take that out, and you would put a thing called an eyepiece in this piece right here. And so we can go over some of the nuts and bolts of all this, but basically the way this telescope works is it collects light. And you have telescopes with different ways to collect light. It could be a lens at the front, could be a mirror at the back. But essentially that light gathering part right there, that part, the size of it determines how much light you actually gather. The bigger that light collecting piece, the more light your telescope can gather, the dimmer the object you can see. It's as simple as that. And telescopes can range from inexpensive to really expensive, just depending on how well the lenses are figured and what they're made of and what the telescope is made of and all that. But they all essentially use the same physics, which is pretty cool. And so I'm going to grab an eyepiece.
So if someone has this type of telescope at home, what would this type be called?
This is called, well, the telescope is called a Newtonian telescope. And that's because Isaac Newton developed this kind of telescope. He wasn't the first person to come up with the idea of a mirrored telescope. There were a few people who did that prior to him, but he was the first one to get it to work. And so very important. So this was the year 1668 when he actually developed the first operable reflecting telescope.
And he would recognize it if he saw it today. He would recognize
absolutely. It looks remarkably like this one, only smaller. There's a mirror at that end. The one difference is you put the eyepiece, the part where you put your eye, is also near the front of that telescope. And this part right here, these knobs, so they're connected. And so if you're right-handed or left-handed, that'll allow you to grab the knob to be able to focus the telescope. Right. And the difference is for the focus of that telescope, the actual tube, a portion of the tube moves backwards and forwards to get you at a different distance away from that mirror down there. But essentially it works the same way. So he didn't have a tube here that went up and down. He had part of this tube actually went backwards and forwards. So kind of the same thing. But then
actually from that angle, it's nice because you can actually, when you're focusing it, you can actually see it moving in and out. I actually never really look at it from that angle before to see how the focus is changing, getting closer to that flat lens. Yeah.
And there's a little screw here, which you may or may not be able to see, but here, I'll take that out. I'll remove the screw so you can see it. The eyepiece goes in, and there's a little screw here that allows the eyepiece not to wiggle around all that much. So it's a So, and what we do is we put the screw in, and we basically say finger tight. All that means is you just turn the screw until you feel a little bit of resistance, and then you stop, because you don't want to break the screw. You don't want to crack any part of the eyepiece. So anyway, so I'm going to put this in, and there we go, finger tight. All right. And pretty much that's it for the main part of the telescope. So anything else you want to throw in for that part before
no, just super quick. So people are going to have different telescopes at home, and they might look at this. I don't want someone to look at this and say, "Oh, well, my telescope isn't like that." So I don't know how mine actually works. The way she put in the eyepiece is going to be the same. So my telescope behind me, I can kind of reach it. I didn't really set it up to use it, but it's a different type of telescope. And this one might be what some of you have seen before, but what you're going to recognize is that the eyepiece on mine goes in the back. So while hers is near the front, mine's going in the back. But in terms of putting it in, it's the same thing. There's a slot for it, and there's screws, and you give the screws a little turn. Is the same. So if you're looking at her Newtonian reflector and you're saying, well, mine's completely different, mine has the eyepiece on the back, it goes in the same. You're going to look through it the same. Yep. So you don't have to worry about that.
Right. There's three main types of telescopes. First one is the type that Galileo made famous, but he did not invent. It's called the Refractor Telescope. So it refracts or bends light. That's your classic when you think telescope. Actually, if you take a look at you've got the name on the bottom there. Yeah, that's kind of what you think of.
That's what you think of.
Little joint there. There you go. Yeah. So lens at the front, eyepiece at the back, and it's gonna work the same way. You're gonna put your eyepiece in the back. You have a little screw and screw it in, and then you'll have the little focus knob, and that'll turn. It'll turn and allow the eyepiece to go in and out so that you can get the telescope all focused up the way it's supposed to go. Yeah. We actually aren't 100% certain who invented the telescope. But Galileo is known for really refining the telescope design, and he pointed it up at the sky and saw stuff. But he wasn't even the first person to point the telescope up at the sky. Other people did that too, but he wrote about his discoveries, published, and so we definitely know about Galileo, and those other folks aren't quite known nearly as much as he is. Yeah. So then the reflector was perfected by Isaac Newton in 1668. The one you have is called a catadioptric, and the main part of that is you've got kind of a glass lens at the front and a mirror at the back, and so that allows the telescope to be the light to be bent in such a way that the telescope is very compact.
Yeah, and so the front comes off, and this is the front. I'm not actually in a position to turn mine right now. Mine's motorized, so I don't have it turned on, but the light comes in here in the front.
Yep. So the Hubble Space Telescope is a wonderful telescope, but it works with the same kind of physics and optics and stuff. And the key to that one was if you didn't grind the mirror correctly, that's when you start getting fuzzy images. And so what I have to remind people all the time is that flawed mirror is still in the telescope. They didn't remove it and put in a brand new mirror. They left the flawed mirror in there because it's big, and they've just replaced it with instruments that essentially have eyeglasses, and they're able to fix all that. So all right. So shall we go on?
Yeah, let's go on.
All right. So let's do a finder scope.
Absolutely. Because you've got one. I've got one. We're armed on these. We're good.
There we go. So
very important. This is from chatting with friends of mine, from talking to people at Adler and other events that I do. The most common source of frustration I get from people tends to be they can't get the finder to line up quite right, or they have no idea what the finder is and they didn't attach it when they took the telescope out of the box, and they can't find anything in the sky. The finder seems to be the mystery item for a lot of people first using a telescope. And it's so important, so it can't be the mystery item.
Right. By the way, we have a commenter who was fascinated by the fact that the flawed mirror is still in the telescope. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So, all right. So the way that the finder scope works is the telescope, sorry, I have to undo the cord. Yep. The telescope has this little bracket on it. And the way this particular one works is there's a little lip here where my finger is, and there's a little indentation right there. And this finder scope slides in. I have to undo the screw. Sorry. There we go. So do that, and I'm going to see if I can do it with one hand. I think so. And tighten it down. Okay. There we go. All right. So the finder scope is not automatically lined up to the telescope. All right. That is the one extraordinarily common mistake that people make is you figure you attach this thing and it's got to be pointed in the same direction, but it's not. If this thing is off by even a tiny little bit, then you may have a lot of trouble finding stuff in the sky. Right. And so the problem with a telescope is the bigger the telescope is, the smaller the piece of sky is that you look at. And so that's why you need a finder, because that will allow you to look at a smaller piece of sky and to be able to find things. Now, we tried this out right before we started tonight. So this actually
it's gonna work. It's gonna work perfectly this time too. I know.
Yeah, exactly. Because as we all know, technology just works every time you want to use it. So there we go. There's the view through the finder, and you can see. Actually, I'll turn it so that.
Oh, that's fun.
Actually, I need to turn it so the camera is facing right side up. And there we go. All right, so the camera is actually right side up. I'm not fixing it so that it's wrong. That is right side up. So, but that's okay. So I'm pointing it down. No, I'm sorry.
The Earth is round. We just happen to be on the bottom right now.
That's right side up. And so I'm moving around, and you see those crosshairs? The crosshairs are what's supposed to be aligned with something in the sky. So how the heck do you do that? How do you get this little thing with crosshairs lined up with this bigger tube? All right, so I'm going to take the camera away and put it back. So give me a sec. I'll explain how this works. Okay, so here we've got the finder. The way this works is the first thing you do when you take out your telescope is, and I mentioned this last time, the first thing you want to do is you line up the telescope with the finder. You put your eyepiece in, and you make sure it's as low power of an eyepiece as you've got. Let me find a low power eyepiece. There we go. Okay, so this is a low power eyepiece. Really wide lens, low magnification. You want to see as wide of a piece of sky as possible. So you're going to put this in, finger tight. There we go. And then you're going to find something off in the distance. Okay, so ideally it's a distant tree or top of a building or something you can identify that's as far off in the distance as possible.
And stationary.
And
you don't want it to be moving relative.
Right.
Don't look up at the moon and say, I'm going to line this up with the moon. It's big and bright. It's going to move.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And because of course the more magnified you are, the quicker it's going to move. And right. So you want to find something as far off in the distance as possible. And then you want to find it through the telescope first, and then look through your finder. And hopefully at least what you want to look at will be within the same view, but chances are those crosshairs are not going to be lined up with it. All right. So there's two little screws here. So this one at the top, I can move it, and that's going to move this little tube up or down. And this little screw right here is going to move the tube right or left. So that means I can turn these screws and line up the finder with what the telescope is looking at. And the reason you want to do that as far off in the distance as possible is because the closer things are to you, the more this is going to be off from this. And so you'll have a greater angle of difference. And so then when you go to something off in the sky, you aren't going to be pointed at the same thing.
Right. So it's kind of like if you're aiming at a bigger target versus if you're aiming at, say, all right, well, this is lined up. They're both looking at that person's shirt.
Right.
All right, well, which button?
Yeah.
Are you looking at the same button? Because that's going to matter when you look at something in the night sky.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so we had a question: does the refractor flip it right side up again? Actually, usually no. So astronomical telescopes are all going to flip the image upside down. It's just the way they work. It's just the way the optics work. And so a regular refractor telescope, a regular reflector telescope, it's just going to be upside down. We tell people it doesn't matter if something is upside down in the night sky, just turn your sky map upside down or turn your moon map upside down. It's not a big deal. If you have a telescope that's made for looking at things on the ground, like a spotting scope is what that's called, or a birding telescope, something to see birds or what have you, there's probably an extra lens or an extra mirror or something in there to flip the image right side up. Yeah. But the more you start adding optical pieces on the inside, the more extra light you're taking away. And we want to see as dim as possible. So that's why we don't care if the image is upside down. So
the more you bounce the light, you're going to start to lose little bits of it. So you don't want to do that.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Anything else you wanted to mention about this?
No. So just you had that finder with the crosshair, which is a very common finder. Some of you may end up with a telescope that doesn't have a crosshair, but has a red dot on it. I have one at home that has a red dot. I have one at home that has a crosshair. We did this earlier, and just like with Michelle, I'm sure this will work on the first try. I'm going to hold up mine. Let me see if I can get it close and then turn it on. Turn it.
There we go.
You got it. See? Okay, there we go. See that we got some lasers behind us. So if you're looking through on some of yours, you're not going to see a crosshair. You're going to see this bright red laser. So that's just a laser finder. It does the exact same thing. The laser, you feel very cool using a laser. You do not feel very cool when the tiny little circular rare battery that goes inside one of these things dies. And suddenly you can't use a finder and you wish you could go old school and just use a crosshair. So
exactly.
I love my red dot finder because I feel very cool looking through a laser. But as good as I think I am at finding things in the night sky with and without a telescope, if I go out for an observing night and the battery dies on my finder and I don't have a replacement battery, without a finder, I bring my telescope in. I'm done. I'm not going to even try. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to find what I'm looking for. I'm going to get frustrated. That's how important the finder is I will quit if I don't have a finder.
Yeah. And so this thing works similarly. I mentioned in the last program that I drive a Mazda, and the model that I've got has this little glass window that flips up when the car turns on, and then it'll project from a little projector down in the dashboard. It'll project onto that glass window and reflect to me, so I can see what the speed of the car is. It's called a heads-up display. They've used it in fighter jets and airplanes and stuff for years and years.
Yeah.
So I have a little tiny heads-up display that tells me the speed of the car. This essentially is a tiny heads-up display too. So the laser projector is this part right here, and it projects onto the glass window right there. And so it will project the little red dot so that when I'm looking this way, I can see the little red dot. And yeah, that's the hardest thing. Like you said, you got to remember to turn this stupid thing off.
Turn it back off. That's a lot of, if you have computerized telescopes, you usually get a message when you're lining it up. Mine will scroll a little message across the screen that says, turn off your finder now that you're aligned. But if you forget to, it's a total out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing. You're done using the finder. You're not going to look through it anymore.
Yep.
So you forget that the dot is on. And then the next day you realize the dot was on the whole night and the battery's dead.
Right. And it's always the case of you think you have one in the drawer, in the junk drawer in the kitchen, but you don't actually.
No, you got a whole bunch of old D batteries, but those are bigger than the finder itself, so they're not going to fit inside.
And you probably just used the last one to put in the remote control for the garage. So
yes.
But the way this works is to line this up. There's this knob right here, and there's this knob right here. So this one, you turn this, and it moves this assembly up and down. This is the power knob. Whoops, that's the power knob right there. Yep. This one turns the assembly right and left. And so these screws are what attaches this particular one to a telescope that I've got downstairs. So, but a lot of telescopes these days come with these. And what I try to tell people is if you have the ability to get one of these other finders that I just showed, it looks like a little tiny telescope, honestly. If you can get one of those, if your telescope allows you to attach it, get one of these. Because just like Mark said, if you get an hour into your session observing and your battery dies and you don't have a new one for your red dot finder, you're done. There's nothing else you can do.
Yeah. I love my power drill, but I also have a screwdriver. Mm-hmm. So you got to be able to still, use it. So
exactly. Now this telescope here is on a particular kind of mount. And so the mount here is called Dobsonian. It's named for John Dobson. And he was pretty interesting guy, lived out in the San Francisco area. His goal was to get people to look through telescopes. And he was all about sidewalk astronomy. But he wanted to make a mount for a telescope that was inexpensive, and he wanted to give away the design as much as possible. So this is a Dobsonian mount. It's basically a lazy Susan, turns, and it goes up and down. That's it. You probably hear it squeaking. Yep. But that's all it does. And it's really easy to use. It's really easy to maintain. There's only a couple moving parts. And so it allows the telescope to basically get manufactured in mass quantities, and they're not expensive. I always get asked how much this telescope costs. And I know Mark has gotten that question a lot. Yeah. And what's kind of amazing is that I ask people what they think it costs. And usually the answer I get is $5,000. And then I say, nope, try again. And then they'll say $10,000. No, you're way too high. This telescope right here costs less than $300. So you're gonna not pay an awful lot for a telescope like this. And that's because John Dobson didn't want one manufacturer to come up with this particular mount. And so he wanted to get telescopes out to the masses, which was great. Yep. You may spend more on your accessories than you do on your telescope.
Yeah, so she showed you the eyepiece that she put in there. I grabbed a couple I have sitting here. This is where the money goes. Mm-hmm. The money goes into the eyepieces, and other little accessories you can get and things like that. And if you decided you need your telescope to be computerized, and you double the price, it just boom, it just completely changes. But the eyepieces, you want to have a whole bunch of different types of eyepieces, fine, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay a lot. So, and actually speaking of eyepieces, we talked about low power and high power. This is something that threw me off when I was first getting into this. Was I looked at, just as an example, these two eyepieces, and one of these two eyepieces, very different size looking at them. And when I was just starting out, I looked at these two eyepieces, and one of them, there's a little number on the side. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get it to line up. That one says 32. And this little guy right here is going to say 8. That's an 8. So I looked at these two and I went, well, the big one says 32 and the little one says 8. I bet the powerful one, I bet the one I want I bet this is powerful, and this isn't powerful. This is nothing. This is this tiny little thing. So I had the numbers flipped in my head. When you're looking at the power of a telescope, you can change it just by changing the eyepiece. So if you see someone advertising a telescope and they tell you how powerful it is, that's a red flag, because you can change it with the eyepiece. So if you want to go low power, it's a higher number. 32 is going to give you a very wide field of view to see a big swath of the sky. Great for looking at the moon, and you're going to get the whole moon in your eyepiece with this one. You look at the moon with an 8, and you're kind of zooming in on a particular favorite crater, and you're going to have a lot of trouble getting it in focus. You're going to have trouble resolving that image. So,
actually, can you throw up that image of those 3 images of Saturn?
3 of Saturn.
That'll be a great illustration. But I've got the same thing. There we go. So I've got this particular one. This particular one is a 40 millimeter eyepiece. This one is a 10 millimeter. You can see physically the lens size is smaller with the 10 millimeter. Right. So already you're dealing with a smaller window to look through. And when you get down into, you have an 8. I've seen some telescopes, like they'll say, oh yeah, or some sets of eyepieces, oh, we have 5 millimeter eyepiece. You're actually talking about an eyepiece that's possibly slightly smaller than the pupil of your eye. That is so impractical. You basically can toss that thing away. But the pictures that are up there are showing different magnifications of telescopes. And so when you magnify an image, yes, that it'll get bigger, but at some point you're not going to really get anything more than a fuzz. And so this is the same object, Saturn, taken with 3 different magnifications. And so you can see, you get to that last one and you go, okay, yeah, it's big, but you can't see anything. So
think of it like an eye test. Number 1, number 2, number 3. Which one do you want? Which one would you rather look at? Personally, I would rather look at the one in the middle or the smallest one. And the smallest one, it's going to be hard to kind of show up on our computer screen just when we're doing this. But if you had your eye to an eyepiece and you're looking through, the sharpness that you're going to see from a smaller image, that image, again, and on our screen right now, you can barely see it, but that's going to look really sharp. The detail on that, when you stare at that, is going to look really good, and it's going to make you wonder, why did I even try blowing it up to that fuzzy image that doesn't look like anything?
Not only that, the higher the magnification you use, the more you're going to magnify any possible jiggling that your telescope is going to experience. Like a little gust of wind comes by. If you're not on a really stable surface, like maybe you're on a deck or something, somebody walks across the deck and they may be 10 feet away, but you can see the telescope do this because the floorboards of the deck are moving around. And so the higher the magnification, the more it magnifies all the jiggling and all of that. So it's going to magnify murkiness of the atmosphere. And so do you have the image of Mars that is 50 times versus 100 times? People are probably thinking right now, oh, wow, that's got to be a really impressive view. And I want to temper enthusiasm or temper expectations, I should say, in terms of what to expect. I'll keep talking while you're doing that.
Yeah, go ahead. I got to find it here.
So one thing that you also can get is eyepieces that, even though these two right here have a very similar field of view, some eyepieces are considered a little more wide angle. This is a 15 millimeter eyepiece, but it has a nice, comfortable field of view. I love this eyepiece. This is basically my favorite one. So this eyepiece costs about $60. So this is a great tool to have because it's a reasonable amount of magnification, not too much that you're going to jiggle everything. And it's not too little that you go, I don't really notice any difference. And so yeah, this particular eyepiece, I love this one. So this one, and
that picture is uploading. It's just taking a few
no worries.
seconds here. So we'll have it here.
Yeah. So with that
little one, I mean, it's like looking through, like, I mean, it's just like looking through a straw, and it's just not even fun. Even if somehow you really loved a big fuzzy image, it's not a whole lot of fun to look through.
Yeah,
it's nicer to let your eye have a little room to spread out and see context. To see, you get a better context when you get a little bit of dark space, or you want to see space. You want to see some space around you.
Right. Another thing you can do is, and I know you get this question from practically everybody, and we do too. What is the magnification of the telescope? As you mentioned, it's due to the eyepiece. It's the same thing with a microscope. Same thing. And you can calculate this. So we did not say there was no math in this program, but it's easy math. So I'm going to turn the telescope. I'm going to grab the camera, and right there. I'm going to see if I can do it so the glare doesn't show. So there's a little label. You probably can't read it, but that's okay. But there's a label on the side of practically every telescope, or it's somewhere on the telescope. This particular one, it's in little tiny print. I'm going to point to it. It's right here. Yep. I don't think you'll be able to read it, but that's okay. It says 1200 millimeters. Take my word for it. It says 1200 millimeters. And if you take that number divided by the number that's on the side of your eyepiece, that is yep, there you go. That is what the magnification of the telescope is. So for example, with this 10 millimeter eyepiece and that 1200 millimeter number that's on the side of the telescope, which is called the focal length. That's the distance that it takes for the light path to bring the light together to a focus. 1200 divided by 10 is 120. And you can do it with any eyepiece that you put on your telescope. Now, what we wanted to mention about tempering expectations was you've got the picture on the left of Saturn. The picture on the right is Mars. Mars magnified 50 times and Mars magnified 100 times.
It's exciting. Mars is great.
Really exciting. Yeah. So so the Saturn pictures were cranking that magnification. So that's not really your normal type magnification. The one on the right is really what you should more expect. And you're not going to get 50 times magnification and 100 times it's going to show up as this big. It's not going to be those giant Hubble images or anything. So we have to make sure that anybody who walks up to the telescope doesn't walk away going, that's it.
So, Mars is the king of that. Generally, Mars is very underwhelming to most people. The Saturn and Jupiter tend to deliver a little better for people.
So we've got those two images of Jupiter. If you get a chance to show those. So while you're doing that, there's one image is going to show Jupiter as blue, and it's not normally blue. They had a blue filter on the telescope, and let me grab a filter. So filters are there we go. So filters are these things. So this is a blue filter. So I look a little bluer, sort of, I guess, maybe, maybe not. Yeah. So a filter allows you to filter out certain wavelengths of light. So you let certain wavelengths in, and that'll bring out detail in certain planets or something that you might not be able to see as easily if you're just looking at it with no filter. Here's a red filter right here. And usually these filters just screw into the eyepiece. So all these eyepieces have the same thread usually. And so you screw that on, and then it's on, and then you stick it in your eyepiece tube, and away you go. But the picture on the left is Jupiter taken with a blue filter, and you might be able to see, depending on how big you see it on your end, there's little stripes across Jupiter. Those are cloud bands. You can see those with your eye.
Looks like it's wearing a striped shirt.
What's that?
Looks like it's wearing a striped shirt.
Looks like it's wearing a striped shirt, blue striped shirt. And the picture on the right is overexposed for Jupiter, but it's so you can see the four largest moons of Jupiter. What's amazing about the human eye is we can see the stripes and the moons at the same time. A camera generally can't. And so you will get Jupiter looking very stripy and very posh. You will get Jupiter's moons showing up. It's really hard to get both of them in the same picture at the same time looking like that. Normally you'd probably have to get the moons and drop them into a picture that just has Jupiter in it, and then you'll get a nice looking picture. So
which is what sometimes you see people will do
when
they're imaging and you see nice pictures online. A lot of them are cobbled together. That, okay, here's the image I took of Jupiter, here's the image I took of Jupiter's moons, let's stick one inside the other one, make it look really nice. But the nice thing is that it'll look better with your eye than it actually looks. It's not going to look overexposed to your eyeball. That's just playing with the filter on your, playing with the pro settings on your phone camera. If you're just using your phone camera to the eyepiece, just to, to get those moons to show up, so it'll look like a little string of pearls like that. But it'll look better to your eye.
Yeah, it's really hard to get Jupiter looking nice through using your phone camera stuck up to the eyepiece. I usually have much better luck with the moon because it's just bigger and it's brighter, so it'll activate the sensor on your phone camera a little bit better. So we've got other accessories here. Oh, this one, I love this. We mentioned looking at the moon, especially when you are looking at near full moon or at full moon.
I have a moon I'm going to pop up here real quick that I took last month sometime.
Oh, nice. Well, the more lit up the moon is, the brighter it is. And it can be a little tough to look at. It's not dangerous, but it can just be tough to look at. Yeah, and bright. So you want to cut the light down a little bit. This is a larger filter. This is for an eyepiece that's a little bigger, but they make these for smaller eyepieces too, for the normal size. And so this is called a polarizing filter, meaning it's a variable polarizer. So if I turn
by your doorway behind you, it's really blocking that out. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Isn't that cool? So this will knock down the light, and all I'm doing is turning one of the rings, and that will cut the light down and make it just more comfortable to look at the moon. And you just turn this until it's the point at which it's comfortable for you to look at. So it's different for everybody. But that makes it so the moon isn't just so incredibly blazingly bright that it just becomes really, really hard to look at. So, we've also got a way that we can look at the sun through filters. Actually, leave your moon picture up there for a sec. I just want to point something out.
And actually, just as a reference, that moon picture, people wondering about the power of eyepieces, that moon picture, I took it a few months ago, but I can guarantee you that moon picture was taken through my 40 millimeter eyepiece, which is the one that's actually on my telescope, that usually just stays on my telescope because that's the one I usually use for things. So that's, I'm not going to look at the moon with an 8. I can. I'm going to just not get the view that I want. I want to be able to see the whole thing. I want to see some context. I want it to fit in the eyepiece.
Yep. So we talked about how the telescope works, where to put the eyepiece. We've got the finder scope. I'm going to remove the finder scope because I don't normally leave it on the telescope just because it's just something else that collects dust. I usually put it away.
Realign it every time.
Yep, every time.
Once you align it out of the box, it's not aligned forever. It's aligned for that one time you're using it. And if you're using your telescope for hours, probably you'll mess with it again.
Probably have to do it again because the temperature has changed, things have contracted a little bit, or maybe it warmed up. And so, your alignment is going to get out of whack. So if you're out for a long time, you'll probably have to realign your finder at least once, maybe more than once. And if you are also out when it's different weather conditions inside your house than it is outside, you'll want to put your telescope out at least 20 minutes prior to using it because it needs to come to ambient temperature. This is a big, long tube, and I'm looking down the other end, and it's essentially sealed at the other end. And so there's no easy way to get air in there. So it takes a while for the air to circulate and cool it off.
Telescope needs to acclimatize.
Telescope needs to be acclimatized. And so winter, summer, at least 20 minutes, even better, half an hour. Just put it outside, put all the pieces outside.
let them all get acclimated, and then away you go.
Yeah.
So we've got also a way that you can use a telescope to look at the sun safely. Do not ever point your telescope or even your eyeballs at the sun without having a proper solar filter. This is a solar filter. So this is what we can use to block the light from the sun. I will do a quick demonstration. Turn my flashlight on. So I'm going to pretend that this is the sun shining through this filter. You see that? That's my flashlight. There's my flashlight.
Yeah.
So this cuts down on more than 99% of the light coming into the filter, and it results in a safe amount that's able to be inside the telescope, or able to be let into the telescope, so you can actually look at it. But the way this works is usually, well, this particular one is glass. So this is glass, and there's some special solar film in between the glass. Yep. I like the glass ones because you can put your finger up to it, and you're not going to poke your finger right through it.
They just feel good.
Yeah. And so you just got to make sure you don't drop it, or else it's going to break. And so this is a metal ring, and they make standard sizes for these. And so a lot of times they'll come maybe with some felt that you just stick on the inside and size it to the size of your tube. And so this one just goes on the front.
If you're looking at getting one, you can go to the manufacturer of your particular telescope. That's a good spot to start, to say, hey, do you have a solar filter specifically for my telescope that I know will fit my telescope? Yep. They should. If somehow they don't, you can adapt that filter she put on right there. That can go on a lot of different telescopes.
Right.
But mine is a little different. On mine, I don't have it with me, but mine actually kind of sits inside as opposed to going over, and it's because it's from the manufacturer, so it's specifically sized to my telescope. I know it's meant for this exact telescope, and it feels safe because of that.
Yep. And if they don't make filters, they'll point you in the direction of their preferred filter partner, so someone they've worked with to make sure they've got the right size for the telescope. Yep. So I've got my own personal preference for brand, and I'm sure you have your own personal preferences and things. So the just have to make sure that it is a reputable manufacturer, because you do not want to mess with your eyesight.
No, don't go cheap on that.
No, don't go cheap on your solar filter. Frankly, this thing costs probably about a third of what the telescope cost. So
yeah,
it's
that was an expensive accessory. It's my most expensive accessory, I think, by far.
And it's worth it. It's worth it. If you want to view the sun, then that's what
the only way to do it. You don't need a lunar filter to look at the moon. You can play with that. You can be fine. But the only way to look at the sun is with that.
Exactly right. I'm looking around to see if there's any of the other little gizmos that I've got. There's all sorts of little filters and things.
If you have a solar filter like the kind that Michelle has on that telescope there, the best way to do that is to put that on, and you saw that she had felt on it that would get it to fit, and that's all wonderful. Also throw on some duct tape.
Yes.
Tape the filter to the you're not going to hurt you're not going to hurt the filter. You're not going to hurt the telescope to put duct tape on it. It's fine. Just tape around the edges, put 2 or 3, triangle it, whatever. Just put them in the side, get it on there nice and snug. So push with one hand so it's snug, and then tape it. And otherwise, bump it with your elbow. A breeze pops up. You have it on one of those Dobsonian mounts that swing nice and easy, which is wonderful. Well, you swing it too fast, all of a sudden, someone bumps into it or leans into it. The filter comes off. I can tell you that's no fun. I can tell you from personal experience, it is no fun when a filter comes off.
Gaffer's tape. Very good. Yes.
Gaffer's
tape is really good because it doesn't leave a lot of residue.
It won't leave a lot of
so that's a good one. Just have to make sure it's sticky enough. That's all.
Yeah.
But I am such a fan of putting the tape on the front of the filter. I don't tend to put it on the glass part.
No. Just on the sides.
Yeah, just on the sides. So 2 pieces, 3 pieces, maybe start it here, wrap it around,
and maybe have some go down to maybe here, stick it on, leave it. But then also don't observe for like 8 hours. I mean, don't have this thing sitting out in the blazing hot sun.
Right.
Every once in a while, move it away from the sun.
Spin it away.
Take it up, take the filter off, make sure no one is anywhere near it except you, and let it come back to ambient temperature. It's still gonna get warm inside this telescope. So you just have
Here's another thing with solar observing. That's very easy to forget because it's one of these out of sight, out of mind things. If you're gonna go solar observing, remove the finder. Remove it. Get it off of your telescope. You don't want it on there because whether you know, well, there's no solar filter on the finder, whether you know that or not, it is instinct to, if you get used to using a finder, to just go, oh, let me check the alignment really quick. And without even thinking about it, you put your eye in front of that finder and you're staring at the sun.
Yep. Yep, exactly right. And so we absolutely have to remove the finder. There may be finders out there that are made for putting on your telescope to look at the sun, but those are few and far between. That is not the standard filter, and you don't ever really see little filter caps that can go on the front of these things. Don't do that. When I was a kid, I was given a telescope about age 10 or something like that. And I distinctly remember seeing Saturn for the first time through the telescope. But also we had a filter for solar filter for that telescope. I kid you not, the filter for that telescope was an eyepiece filter, a solar eyepiece filter. And occasionally you will still see them out there, especially on the secondhand market. They shouldn't make them, they shouldn't be manufacturing them still, but it's usually people who are selling their old telescopes or selling their old accessories, and it gets tossed in with the sale stuff. And it's an eyepiece filter. And what this means is there's no filter on the front. All of the sun's energy is concentrated on the eyepiece and the filter.
Yeah.
And if this thing lets go, if it melts, if it cracks, then your eyesight, you can't pull your head away fast enough in order to prevent damage and possibly permanent blindness. So I am shocked that my entire family has not suffered some sort of eye damage. We didn't have anything happen to that filter, thank goodness, because we didn't know what we were doing. This was like 1982. And so these types of filters apparently had not made it into our consciousness. And so, so if you ever get anything sold secondhand and you see something like that, marvel at it from afar as to the fact that we actually used to use these things, but don't ever use it with your telescope. So. One other little gizmo that apparently occasionally you can find is, and they make these in different configurations. This is a cell phone eyepiece holder, so I can put my phone here and put it into the holder for the eyepiece, and so I can take pictures and they'll be relatively stable. So
so I've seen people use those well. They have the right telescope, they have the right thing for it. If you like the idea of doing that, that's wonderful. But one thing to keep in mind, which I certainly didn't when I bought my first one of those, is I attached it to my phone and then I put it on my telescope, and my telescope was pointed like this, and I hooked my heavy phone onto it and my telescope went like that. And I couldn't get it to stay pointed at what I wanted. It was too heavy. So they make ones that'll make that work, but I had trouble. With that. That doesn't always work, but it's wonderful if you can get it to work.
These cost literally $8, and unfortunately, I've not seen new versions of these. I used to be able to buy them in mass quantities, and we bought a bunch of them for the Adler, but we haven't been able to find new ones. But I like it because it clips on and off. It's not heavy. And there's a little little pad right here, so it provides a little bit of friction.
Now my phone has a case on it, so I might have to take it out of the case.
Usually you have to take the case off. Otherwise, you'll see this little ring of light coming in around the side. There's a gap.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, these are okay. These are good. The ones that are okay are the ones that you put the whole phone into like a frame or something.
It looks like a crab, almost like crab legs, kind of grabbing the whole phone.
Yeah, and the problem with that is especially if they're universal, then everybody's, depending on your brand of phone, your lens is going to be your camera is going to be in a different place, and so you got to line it up, and so that just can be tedious. If it's you using it with your phone and it's only your phone, then that's easier. But if we're doing it, then we have the problem of lots of people coming up to the telescope with lots of different phones. And so one of our volunteers in particular, Steve, he loves to use this because this one, he can change out people's phones pretty easily with this thing. So yeah, so pros and cons to everyone. So, all right. And occasionally it also helps to have a little bubble level. Something you can just put on your telescope, especially the kind you have, because the kind you have. Why don't you explain a little bit how that telescope works?
So mine has one. You can't get it to where you can see it from here, but the platform is right. I'm going to turn my camera. I can move this a little bit. Let me move this a little bit.
There you go.
Okay. Let's see if I can get it. That little dot right there. That is the level. It's just a little circular thing, sticks right there, and it tells me if the telescope is level. That is important for you set the legs up. Set the legs up for the telescope, and then especially with mine being computerized and I'm trying to line it up to the night sky using the computer, it needs to, if I'm not level, then it's not going to track things the right way. So if you are using a computerized telescope level, having it level is one of the first things you have to do. This is a computerized telescope, which is a wonderful tool, especially when you have kids, because if you line up your night sky, then you can find things a little bit quicker, especially if you're not used to finding them just with your eye. So that is going to save you 20 minutes of searching for something and the kid getting bored while you try to find it. So I find that very helpful. Like any computerized thing, yes, I have those. I have a pair of those similar to binoculars are wonderful. Let me move this in a little bit again. I'll turn it this way. So you can see kind of in the front of mine.
There you go.
Turn it.
And I mentioned the focal length of the telescope that you use to calculate the magnification. His is stamped on that ring there right by that glass lens. So yeah, all that white wording, take my word for it, that focal length is there. So it's always stamped on the telescope somewhere.
2000, is that what
2000, there you go. Yep.
There you go. Yep. So that's how mine is on a very different mount than the one she had. This would look maybe similar to what people are used to imagining with a telescope, is this tripod mount. The eyepiece again is in the back. The aliens are right there. Eyepiece goes in the back. It's on this little elbow, so it sticks up. I don't have to have the elbow. I could remove the elbow, and it'll just look straight through the back if I wanted to. But it's a little easier on my back usually to have it in that angle. But you have to be used to the idea of looking down at something that's up, and sometimes that can throw people off, and it doesn't help. So it's kind of just whatever your comfort level is with it. It is I can grab this, will come right off. It has a little keypad on it. So I'm not saying you should or shouldn't splurge for the one that will have the computer on it. There are pros and cons with it. Beginner, I don't think I would recommend doing that, because you want to learn the night sky and how to find things first. Because even despite the fact that I have this, plenty of times I'm out there looking at things in the night sky, I do not turn the computer part on. I just look for something myself. But if you are using this, you can set it up. Different telescopes are going to tell you different ways of how to do it. Pick an object in the sky, pick 2 or 3 different stars, you point it at it, and then you tell it I have to tell it what time it is where I'm located, and then it calculates. So, okay, well then you must be exactly here on Earth. So if you're exactly here on Earth and you click show me the moon, and I click moon right on this little button here, the telescope will automatically turn on its own to find the moon. It's not always perfect. The more time I spend lining it up, the better it's going to be. But it's not always going to do it on the first try. So that's why it's good to get used to not having to use it, because that'll save you some time. It's also important why the finder has to be lined up, because if you miss by a little bit, you're not really going to know when you look through the eyepiece, did I miss left, right, up, down, where did it miss? But the finder will tell you that. The finder will show you that you're looking for this planet and the little red dot is here. Okay, well, let's move those two together. So regardless of how good of a computer you have, you still have to actually know how to use the telescope. You still have to be able to turn it. Again, it's going to computerize to find things for me, but you notice the biggest buttons on here are arrows. Despite how good the computer is, the biggest buttons on this thing are arrows. You can turn it by hand because they know you're going to have to. You're going to have to turn it by hand at some point.
The one problem I have sometimes, because I have the same controller for, actually we have almost the same exact telescope, is the one I have used for doing some online telescope observing with folks. And the problem I have that I've noticed is the buttons aren't different. The buttons sometimes aren't different enough, and you think you're pressing one button and you're not. And I have to get used to looking down before I press a button, because I might press the button that says, "Oh, go back to the thing you were just looking at," and I'm like, "Oh, shoot, I have to start over again." So, so that can be a little annoying. But yeah, the telescope, this completely manual telescope, no motorized anything, I mentioned is going to cost about less than $300. By the way, I didn't mention, we did in the first program, but didn't mention here, the size of a telescope
I was just thinking that.
is indicated by the size of the main light gathering tool. So in this case, the mirror down at the other end is 6 inches across. This is a 6-inch telescope. Doesn't mean the tube is 6 inches long. It means the mirror is 6 inches wide. What is yours?
This one is an 8.
Okay.
It's the bar here. It actually says 8 on it, but it's covered up by the way I have it set up. But yes, that would be an 8. So when you're looking, we talked about, if you're buying a telescope and you see this, you're at, some store and the box says real big letters, huge magnification. Really?
Run far away.
What eyepiece are you talking about? Or are you talking about that one? Or are you talking about this one? What are you doing with that? What do you mean huge magnification?
Yeah.
So you're looking for the main thing in big number you're going to look for is diameter. And this one is an 8, which is a very good telescope for a backyard. The one Michelle has a 6. That's a very good telescope for a backyard. You're going to see, even in Chicago, which I assume most people watching are in the Chicago area, those images we had up, I mean, I can put them back, but light pollution, light pollution's not fun. But if a good telescope, that's what Saturn's going to look like. It's going to look like that. You're going to see that here.
That's not between the first one, the little guy, and the one in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to just not see it because you're not out in the country. But yeah, the diameter is the big number there. If you're, a 4-inch diameter is very good to use in an area like this. And the telescope can't tell. It's a funnel. It's collecting light. It doesn't know the difference between good light and bad light. It's not like the telescope is saying, well, I'm only going to collect the light that Jupiter is giving me. So if I get a really big telescope in Chicago and I point it at Jupiter, it's only going to be the light from Jupiter. No, you get a bigger opening, you're going to collect more light pollution as well. So it doesn't know the difference between good light and bad light. So there gets to a point where you don't really need a bigger telescope in certain situations because you're not really going to get an improvement on it.
So I've got a filter here. Oh, by the way, I keep grabbing the binoculars. It's just to remind me to tell you that if you're just learning the sky,
Gene, I'm getting to your question. Hold on. I gotcha. Hold on. So if you're just learning the sky, just get a good pair of binoculars and learn and get some books and some phone apps and that sort of stuff and learn the sky this way before you start tackling the telescope. But Gene asked a fabulous question because it was like Gene was reading my mind. So light pollution filters. So what's really interesting is they make light pollution filters. This one is called a Sky Glow Broadband Light Pollution Filter. And I'm going to see if this, I'm not sure if this is going to work well. This works really well if, actually I'm going to point it, I'm going to see if this is going to work if I point it at Mark. And I don't know if it's going to make that.
I'm upside down.
You are upside down. I got the camera.
I think it's broken. It's broken.
So the light pollution filter is going to filter out a little bit of the light, and it was going to filter out more of the orange colors of light because these filters were originally made for when we have when we had those kind of orangey yellow sodium lights, and the majority of the sky glow was caused by those sodium vapor lights that, you see pictures of Chicago from the air, you see streets and miles and whatever of those orange colored lights. Well, what's been happening for the last few years is most municipalities have been changing their street lights to LED lights.
Right.
And those LEDs are these broad spectrum lights. And so these filters, which were designed originally to handle light pollution caused by those yellowy sodium vapor lights, they're useless. So don't spend your money on these, because more and more they're not gonna do the trick, because more of our sky glow is more in the bluer part of the spectrum. So if this filters out orange, it's not really going to do you any good. So I don't recommend that you buy a sodium or a sky glow filter. Now they do make filters for certain wavelengths of light that, oops, this one doesn't have a filter in it. See, that's the other problem, is you got to make sure everything gets put back. So they do make other filters so that they'll filter out all but very specific wavelengths of light, and those are for like your really hardcore astronomy, when you're taking photos and you want to really get deep into what some specific astronomical objects are giving off in terms of light. Right. And we have a great question: which are the best apps for the sky? So I've got my favorites. I know you've got yours. So the best is whichever one that you like that you will use. I tend to recommend you not get the totally free ones, because a lot of times the totally free ones you end up paying anyway to unlock features. And so you're going to pay it up front. You're going to pay it as you use it. So just pay it up front and get an app that you really like. I personally like Sky Safari. This is not necessarily an endorsement by the Adler Planetarium. Actually, it's not. But I personally like Sky Safari. I just like the features. I like how it looks. I like how it works. Yeah. There is Stellarium and various other night sky apps. But you want one that will work with the GPS capability of your phone, so it'll know where you are, and ideally it'll know where you're pointed. So which apps do you like?
Sky Safari is the one that I tend to use. It's the only app that I think it's the only app on my phone that I pay for. That isn't just a free app. And I don't know which ones. I don't know which ones require you to buy the. There we go. Yep, which ones are going to require different features to be purchased, but. When I use mine, beyond just, hey, what is that bright object over there, and trying to ID it, I also like the apps that are going to give you that are searchable. So, for example, a lot of times I'll go out and I'll search for the International Space Station. So I'll type International Space Station into the search field of an app, and it'll show that to me, and it'll locate it, and I can track it across the sky. Not going to work with a telescope, binoculars maybe, but looking at the space station is a really cool thing to do. It's incredibly bright. I almost guarantee, I usually tell people that you've almost certainly seen the space station without realizing it, because you probably just thought it was a plane. You're outside at night, you look up at the sky, you see a little bright white dot kind of skirting across the sky, and you give it no other thought. You probably just looked at the space station. It's pretty easy to see. It's really bright, but I like the apps that are going to allow me to search and say, well, I want to look for the International Space Station now. Show it to me. One of the other features I use on these apps, I've used a few different apps, and right now I use Sky Safari. One of the features I like is that they'll allow you. It seemed funny at first. I laughed about it at first, because they'll give you some of these, like Sky Safari will give you an option of what type of backdrop do you want it to have. Do you want it to show as if there's just a horizon, flat digital line, and then the sky above you, and then maybe show you what's beneath the ground beneath you? Or do you want it to look like you're in a park? Do you want it to look like you're in a forest? Do you want it to look like you're in the mountains? And I kind of laughed at that, and I thought, well, that's kind of silly that it's going to show me this, tree horizon. But unless you're like Michelle and you can actually go outside and use your hands to measure angles into the sky to figure out where an object should be, how high it should be above your horizon line, which I've seen her do. If you're not able to do that, it kind of helps to look outside and go, well, it looks like Jupiter is up. Maybe I should see it. Well, but how high up is it? Well, this thing says it's kind of at tree level. Okay, well, the tree in your phone isn't going to be exactly with the tree you have outside, but it gives you an idea of, oh no, that just came up. If I have trees out my window at my house, I might not be able to see it yet because it might not be above what they consider like a standard tree height. So again, it's kind of silly, but I really like putting trees in the thing. And I know some apps don't let you do that unless you pay for it. And I love the ability to do that because it gives me a better sense of, oh, that's still pretty low. I'll go look later. I'll wait for that to get up.
Gene asked Sky Safari 6 Pro. There's different levels of Sky Safari. I personally like the Pro version just because I like all the features, but you don't have to get the Pro version. I don't
have the Pro version, I don't think.
Yeah, you may have like is there like backyard or enthusiast or something like whatever.
Yeah, something like that. It's down a level, yeah.
Yeah. So Sky Safari, they may be on 6, they may be on 8 at this point, possibly. So just check to see what the latest one is. Go to the Sky Safari website and see what they've got, and see which version. And they'll do upgrades, they'll do updates, and when they release a total redo, then usually if you've already bought it, they'll give you a discounted version of whatever the next one is, the latest and greatest. I mean, they'll keep doing the updates, but once they release a totally new version, they'll give you the chance to update to that. And it's good to do that every now and then, because at some point your version is going to be out of date for your phone. So one thing, because I was showing before, I don't know if you got a sense that as I was moving my phone around, that you could probably see the horizon move, and you could probably see it go back and forth. Yeah, the other cool thing that you can do with some of these apps is change to a red screen view so that you do not mess up your night vision. Because if you're
annoying people who are around you,
right. So if you're outside, you want to keep using red light, red screens and stuff, so that you don't mess up your night vision. Although in our light polluted areas, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're out under a dark sky, then you do not want to mess that up, because it'll take you another 20 to 30 minutes to get your eyes reacclimated back to the dark sky. So
yeah, and maybe Michelle can talk about this in terms of her setup. I certainly know the setup at the Adler. It's really nice to go out back at the Adler, look out over the lake, because you got you're not looking out over the city. So that's it's a wonderful help there. But everyone, just you sitting at home with your neighborhood. I have an apartment building behind me that has a lot of lights going up and down it. But when you're talking about the interference from light pollution, you think, well, I can't do anything about that. It's the entire city of Chicago. Even if I don't live in Chicago, I'm getting Chicago's light pollution. There's nothing I can do about the light pollution. The light pollution is what it is. You have to think of it on a local level too, though. If you go out on your back deck and you have your back porch light on, and you go to look through your telescope, and you walk over and turn off your back porch light, it's going to make a massive difference to your ability to see through that telescope. Even just that one little light right by you. So if if you go outside, if you need the light on to get your telescope set up and lined up, I leave my porch light on while I'm getting my telescope all set up. And then once I've got it ready to go, I go in and I turn off my porch light, and then I go inside the house and I turn off the sun porch light. Then I go into the hallway and I turn on the hallway, and then I turn off the kitchen light. Any light that could be in my peripheral vision, I just turn off that whole half of the house. So I'm not getting any of it. And you would think, well, what does that matter when you're competing with light pollution from the city of Chicago? Makes a big difference. I have a light pole in front of my house. I never go take my telescope out of the front of my house because I can't turn off the city street light. I can't turn that off. That's always going to be lit. So I avoid that. My neighbors have a light. So I don't go to one side of my porch. I go to the other side of my porch, because then their porch light is behind my roof line. And I'm just like holding my hand up and blocking their view. That makes a big difference. Just the lights around that you actually can control.
Yeah, we're lucky here. We're in Aurora, so we're farther away from the city. It's not a great sky, but it's decent. But our neighbors are usually great about not turning on bright lights, and if they do, they're not on for terribly long. So
yeah.
But one thing that you could do, let's say you got a telescope and you go, oh man, Jerry next door, I wish he would turn that light off. How about when we can all safely be socially around each other? I am not saying do this tomorrow, but when we can all safely do this, invite Jerry over to look through your telescope and get him to understand what is possible. And maybe he'll notice that light is really bright. Or maybe you can ask Jerry, hey, Jerry, can you turn the light off for an hour? And then I'll let you know when I'm done, and you can turn it right back on. I'll send you a text. And so help people understand that they want to be safe. They want to feel safe. And so that's why they're turning the lights on. And we all have ideas about if that's good or bad. But if you want to get them to come over when it's safe, and have them understand that, hey, it's pretty cool telescope thing here. And so maybe you can get in good with the neighbors and say, hey guys, I'm going out in 20 minutes with the telescope. Can you shut the light off for a little bit? Then they'll understand what that's for.
Right.
So
yeah.
Gene, I just gave you a good idea. So hopefully hopefully that'll work for you.
So what other aspects of the telescope, is there a part of the telescope we're missing that we should be talking about? We talked about finders and eyepieces, different types of tubes. We talked about aligning them, and we talked about what expectations for what you're going to see and not see. You're not going to see what Cassini saw when it was zooming around Saturn. That's not what you're going to get. But what else are we missing here?
Cleaning.
Never mind. Right. I don't want to use a telescope anymore.
Don't dunk these things in water. Don't clean them on a regular, terribly, humongously regular basis with like the starchiest, sandpaperiest rags that you possibly have. I want you to get, yes, and Jean said the mirror knobs in the back of the reflector. That was what I was getting to next. So, they do make cleaning materials for optics. So you want to get some of that stuff. You want to not let liquid get inside the eyepiece. So don't drop liquid in on this thing, because it may get inside the seal and then you'll never get it out. And so then you can get critters starting to grow inside your eyepiece. That'd be bad.
Right.
But it is good to clean the eyepiece, of course, especially in this era of wanting to be clean and safe and all of that. Just get stuff that's especially made for cleaning eyepieces. Go back to your manufacturer and ask them what they recommend for cleaning your eyepieces. So go to, in this case, go to Starguide or Agena and say, hey, what do you guys recommend for cleaning these? And get that. And then for cleaning the telescope mirror, don't do it. If you can't actually tell that that mirror was ever a mirror, then it's time to clean the mirror. If you can't see anything in that mirror, then clean it. Otherwise, don't touch it, because you can do more harm than good. You can have every intention of doing it the right way, and you will scratch the optics. So just don't do it. But there are plenty of tutorials, especially on YouTube, for how to properly clean a telescope mirror. And it usually involves removing the mirror from the telescope, getting some distilled water and a tiny, tiny bit of dish cleanser that doesn't have the added colors and fumes and odors and that kind of stuff. Using that, washing it very carefully, only rinsing it with distilled water, because you don't want tap water, because that's going to leave streaks and crusty things on your mirror. So definitely don't do that. But Jean asked a great question about the knobs in the back of the mirror, back of the telescope. Let me go to that. Okay, so these are important knobs. Number one, you always want to make sure that if your telescope starts off with 6 knobs, you want to always make sure there are 6 knobs. These things have a tendency to fall out, so or at least these do. So just make sure every once in a while that you've got your six little knobs back there. Okay, so this is the back of the mirror. This is the actual back of the mirror. And so there is a frame back here, and that frame is what holds the mirror. Now, putting the mirror into the frame does not automatically mean the mirror is properly aligned as a whole. So this is called collimation. What you want to do is you want to make sure the mirror is flat, is perpendicular to the flat mirror in the other end, and to the front of the tube. So you've got these screws right here, basically just keep that mirror from moving. These right here, this one tilts this part of the mirror up and down. This one tilts this part of the mirror up and down. This one tilts this part of the mirror up and down. And so what you want to do is every once in a while, maybe once or twice a year, you want to check the alignment of your mirrors. And so that's, again, called collimation. But do not turn these knobs on a regular basis, because you can mess up your collimation really easily, and then all of a sudden you don't get anything but fuzzy images. And so your telescope may come already collimated. Again, your particular telescope will probably have instructions with it on how to do that. And so there's no one particular right way to do it, because it'll depend on, did yours come with 6 knobs or 3 or 8 or whatever. I mean, it'll come with different arrangements possibly, or different techniques that the manufacturer recommends. So refer to the manufacturer's information with how to do that. But you want to look for the word called collimation. And then with this telescope, sorry, it sounds like I'm in a haunted house or something with the squeakiness of this thing. This telescope comes with a special cap that has a hole in it. And I put that here, and then I point the telescope at a somewhat bright light, not the sun, but a somewhat bright light. And then I can look through here, and if this thing is collimated correctly, I see all the little optics, all the little images line up, and I don't have something askew to one side of the view. If I saw something askew to one side of the view, then I can turn those little knobs to get it all back. And to complicate matters, there are also collimation screws here.
On that one, yep.
So this big one can loosen this flat mirror so that it can turn, and then those little screws, sorry, it's hard to get my finger in the right spot, but those little screws allow the whole little arrangement here to tilt. And so you have 7 different ways to mess up your mirror alignment if you don't truly know what you're doing. So, I mean, it's not horrible. Eventually you'll get it there. It'll take a lot of very loud words said for a very long time that
if you'll get frustrated, but it's okay. It's a good way to get to know your telescope. If your telescope is giving you good images, don't touch anything. Don't touch the knobs. You're fine. If all you're getting is fuzzy images and you can't do anything to get it focused, and you're turning the focus knob and you're changing the eyepiece and you just can't get it, chances are it needs to be collimated. Refer to your manufacturer's instructions as to how to do that. And if your telescope, oh, where did I put it? The collimation cap, if your telescope comes with one of these, don't throw it away. Don't mistake this for some random piece of plastic.
Packaging or something.
Yeah. This is hard to replace because they're so cheap. They're so inexpensive. Yeah, that's interesting because yours is off to the side.
Right.
Because I think you have a larger obstruction in the middle of yours.
Yeah, I don't know why that. I haven't had to recollimate it, but I have this. I haven't used it yet.
Isn't that interesting?
But I have
so
this.
You probably can't use this one, I would imagine.
No, probably not.
Yeah, these things are so inexpensive that they don't have mass numbers of them just sitting around waiting for people to order a new one.
Yeah.
Because it would cost them more to ship it than it would for them to make them. So they tend not to make these easily replaceable. You can make them if you're a maker. You can make these, and it's not terribly difficult, but it's kind of reflective on the inside. It's got a hole. Don't lose this. Whatever your telescope comes with, don't lose this thing. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah. So if you've got nice images, if your mirror's nice and clean or it's got a little fuzz on it, big deal. Then don't mess with the knobs in the back of the mirror. If you're trying to get your image back to being crisp because it's totally fuzzy no matter what you do, check out the proper instructions for collimating your telescope. And some telescopes, you don't really have to do much, but something like this, we move this one around a lot. It gets banged around a lot. It gets thrown in the back of the Adler van. It gets dragged around my house here in the last 6 weeks. So yeah, we have to collimate this one at least several times a year because those knobs get loose. But if yours is just sitting in the house, don't have to do much to it.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Although it is good practice to always know how to use your stuff. So it's a good excuse.
It's a confidence builder.
It is. It's a good excuse to learn
when it actually is off, that you can get by. I've had a few friends who had a perfectly lined up telescope and they uncollimated it on purpose, and then so they could put it back. So they knew that they could do it.
Yeah.
And I would, I'm not quite that confident, so I would never do that on purpose. But I've had to do it, and it's fine. It takes some language, but it gets done.
And the problem that we sometimes have with a telescope this big or bigger is it sometimes takes two people because it's
one in
really
the front,
difficult.
One in the back.
Yeah, my arms might not be long enough for me to sit at the eyepiece and then also reach to where those knobs are.
Yeah, so this one's a little easier for that to be messing with it. It's all in the same spot. Yeah.
Yep. So man, I think we covered it. I'm looking around.
I think we covered the whole sky here really well. Beetlejuice hasn't blown up yet, has it? Just checking really quick.
No, it didn't.
Okay. Just checking. I haven't looked outside for a few minutes. Brmaybe it has.
No, still there. It got brighter, just as the scientists thought it would. So
last thing I saw, it was at 101% of its brightness. So it's just showing off. At this point, it's just showing off.
It's like, I'll show you.
Yeah, you thought I was gone. Wait a second, I can be brighter.
Right. Well, yeah, we were supposed to get a comet.
And it fell apart.
Comet Atlas. Oh, boo.
Yeah.
But
that all fell apart.
That's what comets do. Actually, that's what that one does.
That's what that one did. Yeah.
Yeah, it has a history of fragmenting. They think it might be part of a comet from 1843 that fragmented into pieces. And so this thing has a history of coming apart in pieces. So no, won't get that one. But Comet Swan seems to be kind of interesting. So
okay,
we'll see if that one does anything. So Jean asked, is that normal? Do you mean for comets to fragment, to come apart? I'm just waiting to see if Jean will write a yes or no.
So I'm waiting, giving her a chance to type.
She's typing right now. She types with one finger. I've seen her do it. It's not fast.
So I'll go by if she meant if it's normal.
Let's go by the falling apart thing if that's normal.
Yeah. So for some comets it is. So if they get close enough to the sun and they heat up and they're not very well held together to begin with, yeah, they'll come apart. And so this is it's something that definitely happens with comets. And there was a comet called Elenin, E-L-E. Oh, and then Brighton again for the stars. I know what you meant. Betelgeuse, yeah. So
it's variable, so it does get brighter and dimmer. But I mean, you can speak to this more than I can. But it got dimmer than was what people typically see. It varied by more than what they usually see.
Gene said it's taking too long to load. So I hear you, Gene. So what happens is the comets can fragment. Look up comet Elenin, E-L-E-N-I-N, and you'll see pictures of a comet that completely came apart. So yes, that happened. Betelgeuse does vary in brightness. It has different cycles of varying in brightness. And this is when a few of those cycles lined up just right. And so it was especially noticeably deeper in bright or lower in brightness than what we normally see. But there was at least a few researchers out there saying, hey guys, this is normal. I'll expect that thing to start brightening up in blah, blah, blah days. And lo and behold,
it did.
It did. Yeah. So it was not blowing up.
If you're used to looking out there at it, which Betelgeuse being depending on if you're thinking of from Orion's perspective or from our perspective, Orion's left shoulder, that's how I always refer to it, is left shoulder. I guess it would actually be Orion's right shoulder, but it's the left side from our view. If you're used to looking at it, which I like looking at that constellation because to me it's the only constellation that actually kind of looks like what they say it looks like. So it's clear that Orion is a group of stars. It seemed to be a group, and no other constellation to me makes any sense, but Orion makes sense to me. So I look at Orion a lot, and it was disorienting when it was dim. It was like, where did it go? It was weird. Really strange. Yeah.
It looked really weird.
It looked like he was leaning away. Like he's like, nope, he's going the other direction now. He's going away.
Yeah, so there are stars that vary in brightness, absolutely. And but that one, it like I said, it has cycles of variability. It's just several of those cycles lined up. So I guess it depends on which way Orion is facing. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If he's shown facing
which sister he's chasing at that particular moment. Yeah.
If the drawing of Orion is shown facing you, then yeah, it's Orion's right shoulder. If he's shown facing away from you for whatever reason, then yeah, it would be his left shoulder. But
let's call it his best shoulder. Let's just call it that. His best
shoulder. Yeah. It's usually shown facing him. So yeah, that one totally looks like a giraffe. Well, okay.
It does not look like a giraffe.
I'll give you that.
It does not. No, I'm not going to give. No, I'm not going to give Gene that. I'm not going to give Gene that. It doesn't look like that. No.
I just apologized to my desk. I hit it with my knee.
I mean,
but yeah, Cepheus the king looks like a house.
Yeah, it does. That looks like a house.
Yeah, Scorpius kind of looks like a scorpion, kind of, sort of. Sagittarius looks like a teapot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Gene, I totally agree with you. So interesting that the variability of the brightness variability lining up. Yeah, because I had not heard that before. I wasn't aware that it had different cycles of variability. So
there are a lot of people running around a few months ago looking for who is the expert on this particular field of study. And it was a little tricky to find because you found plenty of experts on star growth, star variance, and all that stuff. But then you're talking about a category of trying to understand what a supernova might look like, and nobody's seen one. Right. So it's like, all right, well, who's the expert on supernova? Well, this person is. All right, well, okay, but they haven't seen one. So do we really know that this is what happens? Do we really know that this is what it looks like?
Well, we haven't seen one up. We haven't seen them up close.
We've seen one up close, and we haven't seen one as it had. We've seen remnants of them. We've seen, results of them. But the buildup of, is this exactly what it looked like before it went supernova? Is that really what that looks like?
I say mark your calendars. It will be sometime between, drum roll please, now
tomorrow. Yeah.
and 1,000,000 years from now. So
that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'm going to put my money on 150,000 years from now, and then one of us will collect. We'll do another one of these in 150,000 years and see.
There you go.
Who's collecting? I get your Chris Isaac picture if I'm right on that one. The over under. It's like, yeah.
If you can collect in 150,000 years, you can have the Chris Isaac poster.
If I'm around in 150,000 years, that's all I'm going to want. Is a nice
and it's signed poster too. So
see now, yeah, that's on. It's totally on. This is a totally good bet.
Yeah. Total side note: we saw him perform at McCormick Place about 20-something years ago, and it was so good. It was such a good show. Sorry, we digress.
Yeah, I digress. From stars to stars, you know.
Right. Well, that's another thing. If you're going outside to look at the sky, you got to bring some music with. So get your favorite playlist together. And
Bowie's good for that. Bowie's good for going to look out at the night sky. Yep. Got a couple good night sky songs in there. But
Pink Floyd is good.
Pink Floyd is good. Yeah. Yeah, time Pink Floyd with your night sky. Put on Dark Side of the Moon. Watch it move across the sky. It's great.
42 minutes of sheer wonderful rock. One of the best albums ever created. So, yeah, I'm right there with you.
So, does anyone else? There's a lag time probably, but if anyone else has any other questions before we go, we've gone for over an hour and a half here on this one. So clearly there was a lot of stuff to talk about. But if anyone has any other final questions, throw them out there right now. Otherwise, we are going to start wrapping this up, knowing full well that if we are all stuck inside for much longer, we will come up with something else to do. If you follow my Facebook, you know I've had Michelle on here twice now. Once about just the night sky in general, once about telescopes and Chris Isaac. And I've had a astrobiologist on talking mostly about moons around Saturn, ocean worlds. And I've had a Cassini pilot and rover driver on. So we're covering a very large spectrum of what people's expertise are. Today we're talking about optics. Last week we were talking about orbital dynamics and being an astronaut and all stuff. So last chance, throw some questions out about anything. We'll figure it out. But there will be more of these. We will have more of these with Michelle, with other people. So wherever you found out about this, whether it was from the Adler social media, or if you're on an email list for them, or my social media, or shared by a friend of a friend of a friend, wherever you found out, pay attention because we'll advertise another one at some point.
If I can leave a final tip, if we're waiting for folks to throw some questions in there, don't throw your cover away if you can. For this thing, the cover just snaps on the top. You want to keep dust off your telescope. Ideally, tip your telescope sideways so that your mirror faces sideways, because it's less likely to have dust collect on it if it's sideways. Right. If that's difficult to do, because sometimes you just don't have the floor space, then it's really nice to tilt it up and down. Then you can do that. But if you can, try to tilt it sideways.
And speaking of covers,
what do you got?
Your eyepieces come with covers too.
Yes.
Don't lose the covers for your eyepieces. Put them back on. Protect these things, as we talked about earlier. These are not the cheapest part of your telescope. Do not buy them and then throw out the little plastic things. Cover them up before you put them away.
This is also a focus tube cover, so you want to put that in there again.
Yep.
Turn the little screw just finger tight. That's all. You don't have to crank it down. If you happen to lose this cover or this one, get yourself a really big, stretchy shower cap and just shower cap the whole thing. And you might even want to put one on the other end, just in case, if there is space where dust can get in. You can put a shower cap on the other end, but you can shower cap the whole thing, and something happens to it, you just get another one. So. That
was beyond me sitting down and looking through the wrong end of that telescope you have right there when you were doing observatory training a couple of years ago when I was just starting doing Adler stuff. Besides me looking through the wrong end of the telescope, trying to look through the back end of the mirror, my other favorite part was learning about the pink shower cap on top of the observatory telescope. And I just thought, here's this wonderful world-class observatory and a shower cap.
Yep. So we have for the refractor, for the finder scope, for the big telescope, it is a pink shower cap with white polka dots.
It's fantastic. It's the only one you'd want to use. I mean, what else would you choose for that?
I swear, the reason... Oh, Fred! Oh, I just noticed that
Fred's
name.
there.
Hi, Fred! So it's one of our other telescope volunteers. Hi, Fred! Yeah, and Fred knows the pink and white shower cap. But the reason that I got pink and white was because I wanted it to be absolutely obvious when that thing was on or off. So I wanted it to be totally noticeable.
Yeah.
Nothing else in that room
completely stick out. Yeah.
So yeah, totally sticks out. So yeah, there was a method to the madness. So it just is a really good conversation starter too. It's like what?
That's what you're using. Yeah.
So anyway, well, I think that concludes us for today.
I think it does.
Fun.
Yes, thank you everybody for showing up. Again, if you are enjoying these will, or if you missed part of it, these post automatically to my Facebook page. If you're watching it on Facebook and you missed part of it, it'll just post there. It'll just upload itself. You can watch the whole thing. It'll stay there. If you're more of a or you or someone else is more of a YouTube person, I have a little bit of a YouTube channel that I post these on later on tonight. I'll go and upload it there so you can send people there. There's all 3 videos I've done are up there. This will be the 4th. Go find it there. And we will do more of these, and I hope you join us.
And send Mark requests for topics, because
send me requests for topics.
He doesn't know where to find someone. I might know where to find someone or whatever. So
just about every one of these. So when I did the first one was with Dr. Morgan Cable from NASA, who's one of their chief searching for life people. And I just happened to know her via Twitter. And she agreed to come on. It was fantastic. And then she mentioned her neighbor she thought I would talk to. And I was like, well, why would I talk to your neighbor? Oh, he flew Cassini. Okay, yes, I will talk to your neighbor. And then that person, I'm not going to mention it now, but that person was like, I got another person you should talk to. And that person gave me a fantastic name that I'm working on a date to do. Michelle knows the name of this person, because I really hope this one happens. So we're working on that one, and
it's space related, but I will just say it's not Jim Lovell. It's not Jim Lovell.
No. And actually, I joked, I think, with you last. No, I was joking with the Cassini pilot because he was talking about being at an event with Jim Lovell, and I said, "Oh man, I've been at 7 events with Jim Lovell. I haven't met him yet." So I can't wait for my next opportunity to not meet Jim Lovell. I'm really excited to be 0 for 8.
Okay.
I've been at all these events with him, and I'm never anywhere near him.
Okay, okay, I gotta say this. There's one time where he's one of our trustees at the Adler, so he's there a few times.
Apollo 13 commander. If you're not aware of Jim Lovell, he's your Apollo 13 commander.
Yeah.
He's Tom Hanks from the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And he's super nice. And the most recent time he was there, we have an area in our Get Jim Lovell. Gene says, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yes, Gene. I like Gene the way Gene thinks.
Kind of hard, but there's some little couches and stuff, some chairs where staff can kind of sit around and meet, and it's just a little more comfortable than your normal conference room. And I'm walking from my office to a conference room, and I'm walking, and I turn to my right, I'm like, oh, it's Jim Lovell. All right. And I was like, Jim Lovell, he's right here. It was like 6 months ago. He was just there he had a meeting with some staff, and he's right there. And it never ceases to amaze me. Ceases to amaze me. And he's in his 90s and still amazing, and just his voice commands a room. I mean, it's incredible. So Anyway.
So the first person we had on, that person was my idea because it was someone that I sort of knew.
Gene,
she gave me an idea for another person. Someone specifically asked me for how do we look at the night sky while we're at home during all this? What are we looking at? So I brought Michelle on. And then after that one, someone asked about knowing more specifically about the telescope part itself. So we bring Michelle on for that. with the exception of the first one, none of these were my idea. They were your ideas, or somebody else gave me a name. So if you got a topic you want, I've got no shame. I'll go around and ask someone to be on. I don't care what their name is. I'll go and ask them. So you got an idea for what you would like to see, let me know. Again, only the first one was my idea. The rest of these were your ideas.
Gene says, I dated a guy in college who had lunch with him. I think I missed out on that deal. That's funny. About 10 years ago. Good. Sorry, I'm going to name drop. Sorry. About 10 years ago, I had lunch with Buzz Aldrin. That was pretty cool.
I've thought about, there was a moment a couple of days ago where I was like, what would happen if I hit him up on Twitter? And I thought, you know what would happen? I wouldn't hear from him. But, for a moment I thought, whatever, maybe who knows?
Think of it this way, if you don't ask, the answer's no.
The answer's going to be no. Good things come to those who ask. So, yeah. But yes, good ideas, people you want me to talk to, let me know. I will at the very least ask them. So you'll get more people on. So again, thanks everyone for coming. If you have other questions that you didn't get answered or you watch this again, continue to post them in the comments, because I can message Michelle and ask her if it's not something I can answer. So you got a late question you didn't quite get in, I will get an answer to you. Post the question there. I will post an answer in the replies. So, all right. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Michelle. And you have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.